So my name is Andy McMahon, Principal AI and MLOps Engineer at Barclays, and I like a latte.
What is up, MLOps community? We are back for another podcast. I'm your host, Demetrios, and talking to Andy today, we went down so many rabbit holes. I had a blast. I highly respect this man. He is the person that I stole the definition of MLOps. I think he puts it the most eloquently. We talk about it and his definition in this episode. You've probably heard me say it a few times on this podcast if you listened to any episodes before this, because yeah, I shamelessly stole it. It's the best way of looking at MLOps. He currently is working at Barclays Bank, which is a bank in the UK for anybody that doesn't know. And we went down rabbit holes on infrastructure, but we also went down rabbit holes on teams and how to function at a higher capacity, how to be a great leader, and so many other things. I'll let you listen now. And as always, if you enjoy, give it a like or drop in a comment, share it with one friend. And I don't have a song for you today to share with you while we rock into the conversation, but I will give you one thing for your recommender systems. And this was given to me by my lovely wife. I have to share it with the world. For anyone that likes tahini, sesame paste, as some people call it, try black tahini. It is unbelievable. That's all we've got today. Let's get into the conversation with Andy. Dude, so we were just talking about your book and how now it is Oxford material. It's on the curriculum for Oxford, right? Which is, Oxford's no small feat. That's kind of one of the more popular universities in the world, I would say.
Yep.
Especially in the UK, Cambridge and Oxford are huge. But in the world, when you think about the top universities, I know that even me as an American, I knew about Oxford. And I wasn't that worldly before I moved abroad. And so that's really cool. Super congratulations to that. I mean, this is machine learning in Python. Is that the official title?
Yeah, machine learning engineering in Python.
There we go.
Yeah, it's the second edition. So it's been adopted as core material for the Artificial Intelligence, GenAI, Cloud, and MLOps online course. So it's sort of aimed at continuing professional development, people retraining, a lot of existing engineers who want to upskill, but a lot of leaders and stuff. So I was a guest lecturer on the program, but now they've adopted my book, part of the sort of recommended reading, and you get a copy of the ebook when you sign up to the course. So it's great.
Go.
Awesome.
But then you also mentioned that you're a guest lecturer somewhere else.
Yeah, the University of Warsaw. So they have an AI for executives program. So I work there and present on 2 modules across sort of the ML development lifecycle, GenAI and LLMOps sort of stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's cool. Yeah, it's good. It's different from the day job, rather than trying to build solutions and design and all those good things I like. But it's nice. It's nice to share your knowledge.
And so the funny part was that you mentioned apparently 10 out of the first 50 OpenAI
something
employee.
like that, yeah. I've probably now you've put me on the spot. I'm going to caveat and say I've likely misremembered. I was told that a significant proportion of initial OpenAI colleagues, if you like, came through Warsaw. So Warsaw's got an excellent computing degree program. I know that much. And yeah, they definitely had some of the early people in OpenAI came through.
My funny thing was basically those folks probably have left OpenAI already, started their own thing, and then got eaten up by big tech, or acqui-hired by big tech by now. So it is ridiculous how I'm seeing. I don't want to speak out of turn here, because I imagine all these folks that are raising a ton of money and trying as hard as they can to get a product out there in the Gen AI space, especially in the model space. and then they realize that things are a lot harder or something is not going to work, and they say, what's the escape hatch? Well, let's go and let's join big tech. And so it's that notion of failing upwards. But
Whoa. Spicy.
Man,
that is spicy. I mean, I can't talk, right? I work for a bank. I sold out before I started, right?
I don't technically have a job, so I don't know if I'm the best person to be talking shit either. But I look around and I'm like, I could have grabbed the bag. I should have started a model company and raised $500 million. And then after a few years of not releasing a product, been like, now's a perfect time to go and join DeepMind.
Well, don't do a model, but do a rag company or something now. That's what's the next wave. You know, there'll be another wave soon.
Yeah, agent company.
Company. That is the next one. That is absolutely That is happening. That is happening everywhere. Do it.
Can't miss it again, man. That's my ticket to being a cog in the wheel at big tech, which is my lifelong dream.
You want to fail upwards?
Yeah.
If it were that easy, that'd be great.
Okay, 20 seconds before we jump back into the show. We've got a CFP out right now for the Data Engineering for AI and ML virtual conference that's coming up on September 12th. If you think you've got something interesting to say around any of these topics, we would love to hear from you. Hit that link in the description and fill out the CFP. Some interesting topics that you might want to touch on could be ingestion, storage, or analysis, like data warehouse, reverse ETLs, DBT techniques, et cetera, data for inference or training, aka feature platforms, if you're using them, how you're using them, all that fun stuff, data for ML observability, and anything FinOps that has to do with the data platform. I love hearing about that, how you saving money, how you making money with your data. Let's get back into the show.
Oh, dude. Well, okay, before we jump into what we came here to talk about, which is a little bit of MLOps and what you like to call LLMOps, I personally don't believe in that term because I have a vested interest, obviously, to not call it LLMOps. I prefer the term AI infrastructure because I feel like it's more suited for what it is, but we can get into that in a second. What I wanted to ask you about is, when you're giving this AI for Executives course and you're talking about the life cycle, what is the life cycle?
Yeah, it's really good. So I kind of agree with you. I think I use the term LLMOps of necessity. I still view MLOps as encompassing all of this. And infrastructure is a part of it, but there's lots of other things. But yeah, the life cycle is, I like to always think it's the software development life cycle with some extra pieces. And I've said this about MLOps for a long time, right? And it was born of DevOps, and all of these things still stand. It's just some extra pieces. So you still scope out your requirements. You still understand what you're going to do. You still go through sprints or Scrum or however you're going to do it. But you go through a classic route to live of development, pre-production or test, and through to production. As part of that, you have to do testing and validation. Post-deployment, you have to monitor, and underpinning it all is infrastructure. You want to automate all of those processes as much as possible. That's it in a nutshell. The challenges come because when it's not traditional software, it's machine learning or now Gen AI or AI. The whole question of, what does testing mean automatically has a much bigger answer. It's not just
data pipeline.
Exactly. Where does the data come from? Garbage in, garbage out. What does monitoring mean?
Yeah.
All of those things have extra pieces. But fundamentally underpinning it, it's not that different from software. And I think that's a big learning many organizations have had over the past few years. They sort of, ML came on the scene and now Gen AI and AI is coming on the scene. A lot of organizations maybe raced to reinvent the wheel, and then they actually discovered a lot of stuff could be leveraged that's out there, and then you could focus on the value added new pieces. So I think that's a journey where we seem to be going through with Gen AI again, and I'm keen to accelerate that. I can see us sort of going back to the same place we were at with the first wave of data scientists, or then deep learning, sort of starting to do that again, where we think it's all new, throw it all away.
Yeah.
But actually it's just, you're adding some pieces, you're adding some processes. Just everyone, take a breather, take a beat.
Do you feel like the And by the way, you are the person that I stole this from, which I still, to this day, will quote you every once in a while. MLOps as a term, I like your definition of MLOps the best out of any I've ever heard, which is going from N plus one models. So you said it like, yeah, all right. Basically, the standardization or the practice of MLOps is when you're taking one model that is in production and scaling it up to N plus one models.
So it's exactly that. So I likened it to proof by induction, this mathematical concept. But yeah, fundamentally, it's like you say. So getting one model into production, the first model is always a big achievement for an organization, a team, a company. They're always super excited. But that's sort of day zero. Day one, day two is, I need to go back and do it again.
Yes.
And then what do? I've got two models. Is the second one replacing the first one? Are they running in parallel? And obviously, both of these are true eventually. Eventually, you have different products and services. They're all having champion challenger sort of logic going on. And that is exactly it. And that totality of all that is MLOps to me. Because it's very easy. Well, it's not very easy, but I say it's easy to get one in production and monitor and maintain it. You just throw everyone on that. When you start really thinking industrializing this process, and, there's different analogies people talk about, going through the sausage machine or whatever, or the conveyor belt. But it's exactly that. And I think like I said before, it's going from N equals 1 to N equals 2, and then eventually you know how to manage what you've got, but you know how to increase the estate scalably.
Yeah, that's the ideal state that you're at. One other piece on this, since you were mentioning DevOps and how, and I fully agree, like MLOps is heavily inspired from DevOps, but I think what I've seen, and it's almost like every iteration, it gets progressively worse in that thinking that DevOps is just tooling and it's just the tools that you use to accomplish these things. And then MLOps, I saw it happen a lot, and you probably saw it happen a ton, especially in those basically 2020 to 2022 era, where it was more conversations about the tooling and less about the processes and the cultural side of it.
Yes.
And
100%.
I 100% see that with the AI infrastructure space right now, where people just care about the tools and less about what is it that we're actually trying to do, what's the process, what is the culture, and how we can make this be that N plus 1 style of execution.
100%. And this is something I've seen for years, as you said. It's still around, right? It's silver bullet thinking. It's sort of, if I just find the perfect tool or the perfect architecture, the perfect combination of tools, I'll be sorted. It doesn't work that way at all. I maintain, I've said this in plenty of times, and people will shoot me for this, but you could do any and all of this in Excel, really. If you had an awesome process and really good people, right? And that's the point you're saying. It's about process and culture first. Those are the sort of, and like you said, solving the real problem. So those are the first order problems. The sort of second order, or maybe a first order problem is data. And, the underlying sort of the ecosystem, how rich is the soil you're sort of planting in. Third or fourth order is tools. Absolutely. And like you can do so much with open source. You really, really can. And you should, I always encourage teams and people I speak to, like, push the boundaries of open source first. And that then, you then become what I call a kind of a more competent buyer or a more informed buyer. Because you can very much, you get sales pitches, and this is happening with the Gen AI stuff because it's so new. People blow you away with amazing decks and cool demos and everything's really slick, and you just think, I need that. What you actually need is end products that work. You don't need that tool necessarily. So go and try it other ways first, and then you find out where the gaps are. Because if you actually find out that, I can't get Gen AI working because provisioning AWS accounts is so hard for me. You don't need like the fanciest RAG application as a service. Then you need something more on the infrastructure side. You just really, really do the groundwork, the homework, push the bounds of what's available in open source, and give back to open source if you're all doing that. Well,
yeah, contribute back. That's huge. That's so true. And even knowing and trying open source first will educate you as a buyer, because you're going to know what features are actually valuable and what you wish that open source tool had or potentially was able to do that for some reason it's not able to do. And so then when you go on the market and you look for a tool, you're more capable of saying, let's find something with these requirements. Because if everything is new in the beginning, you're going to not know what is really important for your use case.
Yep. No, that's it, exactly. And the other thing as well is you really start understanding what the reality is, and this sort of links to what you're saying, but it's very easy from, like a great example is like the demos that came out around, say, Devon and all the other stuff, the auto developer.
Yeah.
And very quickly, I thought this was funny. Everyone said, if they've automated development, why are they hiring developers?
Yeah.
But that's a side point. But like that was a demo video, that was some, snippets and all of this stuff, all of this hype. But really, if you're the people playing with, LangChain or whatever it is, and you're just, Olama, and you're playing around with this stuff, you go, that would be incredibly difficult to do. And that's you becoming more informed right away, to your point, because you can smell crap a bit easier.
Yeah.
And you understand where the sort of research activities are. So, for example, how hard it is to build agents that actually perform very well and robustly, right? So if someone comes to you and says they've solved that problem, if you've played around with it, you're going to have a far higher bar placed on them before you give them your cash, which is so important, right? Because otherwise you're going to make crazy decisions.
Yeah.
Which is easy to do.
And expectations aren't going to be aligned. You're going to be thinking that you can do one thing and probably get a rude wake-up call at some point in time.
Yes.
And the piece that you talk about too there is, I heard it put wonderfully yesterday. I think it's like a HashiCorp fundamental within the way that they build. And it is something along the lines of workflows over technology. And so the whole philosophy there is saying, all we care about is the end goal. However we get there, that can change a million different times, and we can optimize it for the better as we find better tools out there, or we recognize that we can build a pointed solution that will service our needs better. But really the important thing is that end state that we are going for. So how we get there, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And exactly. The implementation details aren't the important piece necessarily. Yeah. So a great kind of way I think about this in my head is when I see an architecture diagram, it's generally the case that I could swap all of the boxes for a competitor tool and it would still work exactly the same. And that's good.
Excel. I thought you were going to say I could swap all the boxes for Excel.
I'm maybe going to have to retract my Excel statement, right? So do that up to a point, but the point roughly stands right philosophically.
Yeah.
But if you're, and even at the level of the cloud provider or something, right? If I have to port from one to the other, functionally they are mostly equivalent by necessity, and increasingly a lot of tools are becoming interoperable. They're all sort of tending towards standard API structures and standard contracts, and that's all very positive. So it does mean that kind of if you look at your architecture and the specific component that does like the ML pipeline piece, if you know you can confidently swap that out for one of the other tools, you've generally built the right workflow to the HashiCorp point. So I 100% agree with that. Where it becomes difficult, and this is me thinking with my bank sort of hat on, or large existing organizations that aren't, say, big tech, they will have a lot of legacy solutions lying around. And sometimes that just means, there is bespoke things that have to be built. But in general, the core point of that still stands. Is like things should be interoperable. And that's how now you can get best of breed architectures where you say, I'm not going to go all in on one platform. I'm going to use multiple that all do different things better. So I'm going to have one thing for monitoring and one thing for scalable training and one thing for data engineering. And that's all very doable now.
Yeah, I remember also back in the day, I heard somebody talk about how they were hybrid cloud just to minimize the potential blast radius. If they took down their whole AWS instance, at least they knew it would just be on AWS, and they had their whole GCP instance that wouldn't be affected.
Well, you're laughing, right? But that is policy in large organizations that are not kind of sort of tech native, etc. That is the case. And so sometimes it is necessary, if you like, because say a large financial institute like a large bank, we're critical infrastructure for like the British economy.
Yeah.
So like it's good that we have people worrying about that in a sense, but it's true as well that, like, you know, it still stands what you said. The workflow should be able to work on-prem or in cloud. It's just different tools and components that do the specific tasks.
And you've inevitably been in a lot of rooms, I can imagine, where the ROI on switching tools or upgrading tools from legacy is being discussed. How do you generally go about that conversation?
I think like you said, you're always focusing on the ROI, and that becomes complex very quickly, because you're not just thinking, you know, per unit cost of running queries or of storage or something. You're also thinking of total cost of ownership, the entire life cycle. So I have to decommission this existing stuff. I have to spin up all this new stuff. I have to maintain and run this new stuff. I have to maybe upskill or train or new hire sort of comes into it as well. So it can become complex, but I think you always have to think, what are the key components of the ROI calculation, and what is the target state we want to aim for? And it's always a balance between that short-term benefit of maintaining things as they are versus, you know, you have to go through some pain to get to the real target state where the benefits will drive through. But it's always complex, and sometimes the answer is not rip it up. Sometimes the answer is no, that has to stay as is, or it's not worth it yet, is another answer.
When have you recognized that? Like how, and because I can imagine there's, it's like hawks and doves in the government almost, and
it is sometimes, yeah.
It feels like there's probably a lot more hawks than doves, because engineers just like to get their hands dirty, and the new stuff is always going to be cooler than the old stuff. So when have you thought about that just has to stay, and what were the arguments that won you over?
Well, I think it's actually interesting you think there'd be more hawks. I think in certain industries, heavily regulated industries, right? This applies maybe less in some jurisdictions, but like in Europe, if you're in finance
and banking, there's a
it's
lot of doves.
It's exactly just by nature of the org, and I think that's a good thing in a way, because, like I said, we're an important part of the economy, so we can't just go fail fast and break things, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't apply when people need their money out of machines. In some cases it should apply, and you should always innovate and move forward. That's important. But you can move at the pace of some big tech, right? That's just fundamentally true. The other aspect is that, well, related to that is like stability is really important. Trust is important. We are custodians of people's data, and it's super important data, right? It's the stuff in your wallet. It's your earnings. It's very personal information. It's all of these things about your life. So that's taken very seriously. So it's that feeds through to there being many doves. Now there are lots of cases where you put on a hawk hat and you think, this is crazy, we need to rip up. But I think the cases where it's prevailed, and I won't go into details necessarily, but there are just core pieces of banking infrastructure that have been around for decades. And I am not sure when they will be sort of totally hauled and revamped. And in a way, it's kind of like, you know, these systems keep working, so let's not poke it too much in a way. Which might sound scary to some people, but actually it's it's good because they are well maintained, they are well looked after. They do have really strong kind of governance and programs around them. But yeah, there's actually, I would say it's more dovish than hawkish. The key challenge is bringing in a balance so that you innovate and you don't kind of get killed by your competitors. But it's a hard balance, right? And there are like upcoming sort of fintechs and new starter banks and stuff that are challenger banks, as they're called. They're a bit more nimble and lighter, but at the same time, they're getting started out. I'm sure once they become the scale of like a huge bank, they'll have different. They'll have to, you'll join us. Live long enough to become the villain, as they say in The Dark Knight, right?
Exactly. I remember we had, I think her name was Michelle from Lloyd's on here, and she was talking about how they were going through the migration to cloud. And it was a $3 billion project. And it was almost, I think she said they budgeted like 6 or 7 years for the full migration. And so that type of stuff, it's like when I was in Portugal and I was getting a tour of Lisbon and someone told me, yeah, that building took 250 years to be created. And the first and second generation didn't even live to see it be finished. And I'm kind of like looking at that Lloyd's
like
migration,
building the Great Wall or something. Yeah. You're definitely building cathedrals. Yeah, that's sort of how I would think about it. But that's, again, like when you break it down, it's actually made of much smaller wins. When you hear that, you think, why would I ever go somewhere where I do that? But it's not that. It's not the case that you're just, sitting around doing the tiniest iteration. What happens is more, you divide and conquer, right? So what you say is one part of the bank or one set of data will migrate first, and then we'll derive lots of value, and we'll build MLOps and all the infrastructure we need for data science, etc. there, while the hydration is continuing in other parts of the bank. So I was kind of speaking to someone about this recently. When you're in an environment where the end-to-end is a bit slower, or there's kind of more steps, what happens is you, rather than vertical scaling, you horizontal scale, to borrow a kind of infrastructure term, right? So what you do is you end up running lots of things in parallel and driving value that way. And then they all start landing in a sort of consequential fashion and get you to where you need to be. Whereas in maybe a more startup focused world, so when I worked in the much smaller companies, like a startup, it was more, you had a job, do it end to end, move on to the next one. Now it's more, we have slightly longer pieces of work, but let's horizontally stack them and spread our time between them and keep moving all of them forward.
Yeah.
So it's just different scale. But then when things land, it's massive impact, right? Millions of customers, people, we're catching fraud better. So we're literally protecting people's livelihoods and their money. And I remember working on projects before NatWest, it was like you're breaking up slave rings, modern slavery and all these things. There's all these amazing things that come through banking technology, right?
Yeah.
That's easy to sort of dismiss and forget, but it's like it's critically important, and it's very real for people. It was the first time I worked in an organization where everyone understood what I sort of did. I could say, that retail app on your phone where you do your banking, we're protecting that and looking at the data, and I get that. Whereas before, when I worked in, say, energy or logistics, that I just don't understand. What do you mean? What do you mean you're doing a routing problem? Lots of diagrams on a whiteboard. Whereas it's very visceral, and it's really direct impact on customers, which I really like. That's why I've kind of stayed in finance these past few years.
All right, real quick question for you. Are you a Microsoft Fabric user? Well, if you are, you're in luck, because we are introducing SAS Decision Builder. It's a decision intelligence solution that is so good, it makes your models useful. Because let's face it, your data means nothing unless you use it to drive business outcomes. It's something we say time and time again on this very show. But wait, what do you mean by nothing? Well, SAS Decision Builder integrates seamlessly with Microsoft Fabric to create effortless business intelligent flows. It's like having a team of geniuses you manage in your pocket without all that awkward small talk.
With Decision Builder, you'll turn data into insights faster than brewing a double espresso. And you know how much we like coffee on this show. Visually construct decision strategies, align your business, and call external language models. Leverage Decision Builder to intuitively flex your data models and other capabilities at breakneck speeds. There's use cases for every industry, including finance, retail, education, and customer service. So stop making decisions in the dark. Turn the lights on with SAS Decision Builder. Yes, I did just make that joke. Watch your business shine. SAS Decision Builder, because your business deserves better than guesswork. Want to be one of the first to experience the fusion? Want to be one of the first to experience the future of decisions? Well, sign up now for our exclusive preview. Visit sas.com/fabric or click the link below.
So talk to me about how you look at the addition of AI to the ML workflows. And when you're thinking about a platform, are you thinking about the ML platform also servicing the AI needs? Or is it now you're thinking about these two are separate, or the AI part is greenfield and we can move faster if we just start from scratch?
Yeah.
What is that?
Good question. So the way I try and think of it more as a sort of, you're providing an ecosystem in which the organization can, first of all, play and experiment, and then eventually build products and services. But you're sort of, it's not as strict in my mind as like, this is the platform for this is the platform for this. So depends how you slice and dice it. But it's more, you're creating an ecosystem of capabilities that people can tap into. So sort of tools on the shelf. And then it's up to the business, based on the requirements they have for customers, for colleagues, etc., what they need to build, and then they can go to the shelf. So the key thing is building the right stuff to put on that shelf for them to use, or enabling it. So what I kind of think about a lot is, the traditional ML use cases are not going anywhere. They're not. They're going to be around forever, right? The thing that's going to outlast all of this is SQL. Right, but let's not go there. The longer that rule, I can't remember it, but the longer technology's been around, the longer it will be around.
It will be, yeah.
So like, you think like SQL's been around forever, it will be around forever. ML is catching up. Yeah. It's gonna be there a long time. And then you've got AI. The way I think about it is, are you servicing the capability? Are you giving people places where they can access the data, do their exploratory analysis? Have you got development workflows where they can build machine learning models, and the pipelines that those sit in, can they orchestrate them and can they monitor them? A lot of that thinking still applies to the AI world. The big difference now is, obviously, you don't own the models. So the focus of the life cycle is a bit different. You're consuming models as a commodity or a service. So I keep talking about models as a service, or as a commodity. So you're just going and purchase the use or renting the use of these models that someone else has built, in most cases, the vast majority of cases. And that's just a different setup. So what it means is, the traditional MLOps lifecycle was far more focused on, how are you going to train? How are you going to track all of your experiments when you're training? How are you going to optimize the hyperparameters? And how are you going to then, obviously, validate all of those runs in a sensible way that translates to a production setting? Now you're not training. You might be fine-tuning a little bit.
Yeah.
But even then, that's not most use cases. What you're probably doing is actually saying, now I'm building, a vector database. I'm chunking and indexing data in that database. And I'm building my chains or my flows around how I interact with the LLM to get the best usage of that data.
Totally.
But you're still doing the monitoring piece. You're still doing evaluation. And you're still going through those sort of stage gates that you would before. They're just sort of different tools on the shelf again. So I kind of view it as, you're just building out this ecosystem, and people can tap into it when and where they need. The kind of interesting case that I think hasn't come up yet, but will, is when people want to do very hybrid solutions. They're both traditional ML and AI. So things like function calling and more agentic workflows, right? That's going to be really interesting, because what you're going to have is like, AI will be the key backbone and even part of the orchestration framework almost. if it's doing function calling, but it might call out to your proprietary models that you've built. So I can imagine a world where we say to an LLM, run this analysis and use my existing, fraud detection models. And what it does is it hooks in to your proprietary models, pulls in the answer and synthesizes it with other models and comes up with an answer.
Yeah.
And, and there's going to be a really interesting question there about how do you expose your models as services that can be consumed across the organization? How are you going to, again, validate that? Because that becomes really complex very quickly. But that's the sort of thing I'm thinking towards. But I think of it as it's an ecosystem. So you could view it as all one platform, or you could view it as just a collection of sort of buckets of technology. And the key thing is telling people, to your point earlier, what is the workflow and process for hooking these things together to build a solution?
Yeah. Making sure that's standardized so that all teams can access whatever they need to, whenever they need to. And the idea of the hybrid AI plus traditional ML is fascinating to me too. I think about some things that I've seen, and I can't quite put my finger on how it works now, but I know that we have had people come on to the LLMs in Production virtual conference and talk about recommender systems. Yeah. And using LLMs in the recommender systems. There's the very easy way to do that is just asking an LLM to recommend things or saying, I'm X type of person, recommend something to me. So that's like a very basic LLM recommender system type thing. That doesn't account for recommender systems wanting to be very fast. And the other pieces that most people aren't just looking at, I'm X type of person, recommend where I should go on vacation. So yes. There's yesterday I was talking to a guy who was mentioning all of these recommendations, job recommendations, and all the features that they're using to create those recommender models, and then how they need to make sure that when they're serving it, it's super low latency. And that you don't quite get with LLMs yet. Maybe you can figure out a way to prune or make it super, super small models and get something. But I do think there is a world where we start to see more LLMs incorporated into recommender workflows. So I've heard people talk about how they use LLMs to get suggested features that might work. And so that's another cool one. It's a little bit before the training happens, right? Or it's a little bit, I would say, like on the other side of the serving. But it's cool. And the last thing I'll say about what you're talking about with the ecosystem, which is a great notion of how to think about it, instead of thinking, hey, there's this platform that you plug into here if you're an ML engineer and you plug into here if you want to do AI. It's more of, you've got all these tools, you string them together however you want because you're the creative artist. I'm just giving you white paint, black paint, a few paint brushes, and then you make the masterpiece. And the fun part now, I think, with AI and having these models exposed, or having these models as a commodity, as you were mentioning, is that you don't have to be an ML engineer. You don't have to be a data scientist to get the value if you can figure out how to make it work from these models that are models as commodities, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're gonna have a kind of stratified strategy, stratified strategy. But basically, you're gonna have sort of one tier of applications is exactly that. It's sort of baked into some vendor offering or some existing solution you use, right? So co-pilots are popping up everywhere. Those LLMs being baked into so many existing software products that we use day to day. So, in my email, in my word processor, in my IDE for coding, there's going to be co-pilots there that you can use. And like you say, I'm not building an application that does that. I'm just using it. Then there's sort of slightly lower level. There's things, that are a bit more GUI driven, drag and drop, push some buttons. Like Microsoft Copilot Studio is an example. Sort of, it's getting to work. You're still building something yourself, but you don't really have to be a deep technologist to do that. And then there's the level of, no, we have to have a lot of control here. We have to really own everything end to end, and we want to build very bespoke components or string them together in a certain way. And that's when you get to like the AI and ML engineer. And I think that'll all work together as long as people are clear. But you said something very important earlier, which is about being driven by the actual needs of the organization or of your customers. The danger I sort of worry about sometimes is we shouldn't just do Gen AI to do Gen AI. Just like before, we shouldn't have done deep learning to do deep learning. We shouldn't have done data science to do data science. We should really spend time as organizations really understanding, where does this drive value? Because it will drive value. It'll absolutely drive value. It might not drive value to the tune of trillions of dollars and stuff that's been thrown around. I'm a bit skeptical of that. But it will drive value. It's just about being very clear on, here's the need for that. And then there's an education piece that comes as well, because now everyone has heard of Gen AI, but many people have not still heard of traditional ML.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of people maybe thinking, I've seen things like people saying, I could use Gen AI to classify something. Technically, yes. However, you could use logistic regression.
Sure. It'll probably be cheaper and faster.
It'll be cheaper, faster, and far more controlled. And again, in a regulated industry, sometimes that's the kicker, is like, actually, I have full control and auditability of this, whereas otherwise that's a black box. And I know this thing is going to perform. It's far more deterministic. It's still statistical, but it's more deterministic than a Gen AI model, and I completely own it. My little logistic regression is going to give me the same prediction today, tomorrow, and next year based on the same inputs. Some Gen AI models won't if they're provided by third-party providers and still doing pre-training, etc. So those are important considerations. So there's a kind of education piece that has to happen as well, where people are, they know that playing around with an LLM, they can do certain things. And then you say, actually, there's other ways to do this. The recommender example is brilliant. The naive way won't scale yet. It'll be super expensive. It doesn't probably make sense in so many ways. But maybe you use a traditional recommendation engine and you get some of the first N recommendations and use an LLM to synthesize a response. And say, if you're feeling this way, do this. If you're feeling, you can do lots of different combinations, but
yeah,
it's just that hard thinking still has to be done around what products should we actually be building.
Yeah. That's exactly why I felt like the product managers are the ones who are really crucial at this point in time.
Yes.
Because we've both seen so many products come out that are doing Gen AI just to do Gen AI. And you see it and then you notice it. And I remember being at a hackathon a few months ago and people were telling me how they were doing this cool thing with the LLMs, and it was an LLM hackathon. So of course they're trying to figure out ways to use LLMs. But then I asked at one point when I was one of the judges and going around asking and hearing the pitches, and I asked, so why can't you do this with just like regex?
Yeah,
and
that's true.
They literally said to me like, oh, that's the cool part, you can. I was like, well then
just do it.
Yeah.
I can't remember who said this, but I wish I'd known. If someone knows, please tell Demetrios now. But someone said this before. They were like, "Yeah, you're using a literal supercomputer to reinvent regex."
Yeah.
Like, think about what you're doing. Like, just learn some regex.
Exactly.
Or learn some SQL. Now, there are cases where like text to SQL is an interesting one, right?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of debate about this, and there's some people I follow and things are like, you should just learn SQL. But on the other hand, if you're a non-technical user and you need some information from a database, text to SQL is going to be super useful.
Yeah.
If you do know SQL, however, the precision control that gives you, it might end up not being worth your time to go text to SQL. If it's the same with the coding stuff. Like, if you know nothing, just get an LLM to write it, and maybe it's broken, then ask it to fix it, and you'll get somewhere and you'll learn something. But if you know a little bit, you're not going to get it to do everything for you. It's like having really helpful assistants around you. You're not going to get them to do absolutely everything, because what's the point of you? You're going to offload tasks to them and delegate and manage. But I totally agree with your point on product. Really good product managers and people who think in a product mindset more generally. That's going to be the key differentiator for teams and organizations moving forward.
Yeah, folks who understand what technology they now have at their fingertips, but they're not so hawkish, as we were saying before, to just stuff it into everything. And that's worth its weight in gold. Okay, dude. So going back to the idea of architecture and Gen AI and having this ecosystem of toys that you can play with and string together, I think the tools that you need are so similar, but just a little bit different. So I don't know how bullish you are on trying to recycle tools from traditional ML into the Gen AI space versus we probably should have a whole new tool for that.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have new tools and new capabilities. It's just I put them on the shelf with all the other things, as I was saying earlier. So for example, vector databases. If you're going to go hard and build your own RAG stuff, which plenty of organizations will be doing, that wasn't really part of the classic data science ML engineer bag of tools, unless you were in. It was if we're talking about recommendation engines. They were using vector embeddings for a long time, and not in the same way we do for RAG, but getting towards that, right? And that was there. But in general, for most data science teams, they weren't sort of thinking about PG Vector and Chroma and all these tools. They just weren't. Now that is part of the language and part of the toolkit they need and expect. So you need to enable that. The other thing is obviously just the providers of the models. They all have different sort of setups. So the different cloud providers, they have their models and they provide surrounding sort of ancillary products. They provide agent frameworks. They provide guardrails. They provide out-of-the-box databases. And you just need to educate people in, how much you want to consume that versus just consume the model and build some of the other stuff. And it's just it's always a balance. And it's always a balance. It's just like when we migrated to cloud, the sort of how far up the abstraction sort of ladder do you want to go? You can go all the way to just consuming SAS. So I'm just going to use ChatGPT, Perplexity. I'm just going to use MS365, Copilot, whatever. I'm never going to care about what's happening in the background. That's, again, one tier, right? You go a bit lower and you say, actually, I'm going to build sort of my own front end and hook into an LLM provider. And then you eventually say, I'm going to build my own vector DBs and do my own chunking strategies. So then you get all the way down to, some crazy people will be saying, I'm going to compile Llama CPP and run it on a bare metal server that I have running in my room or something. And that's all fine. It's just being clear how far up and down that ladder you want to go and what the benefits are. So obviously you get more abstracted, it's easier to use, but it often costs more. And then you go down the ladder, it can be a bit cheaper, but you have more work to do and you need specific skills. Yeah. They all have their place, but it's just sort of doing it. But yeah, the tools are definitely different. But a lot of tools are similar.
Was thinking about evaluation and how similar that is to monitoring, but how it's like not enough to where you can, and when you're thinking about, okay, now I'm collecting a golden data set and training my model with that, how similar that is to, all right, I have my golden data set for what I'm going to evaluate the model's output on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I was talking about this to colleagues earlier. The challenge is exactly like you say. In traditional ML, for supervised learning especially, I had ground truth. I will get the ground truth eventually. I'll be able to calculate my performance. If I do that in a schedule or event-driven way, that's me doing monitoring. Point-in-time evaluation and monitoring were very similar. For a lot of LLM or foundation model or Gen AI applications, ground truth is a slippery concept, and that's not really what you're after, right? If I'm providing a chatbot experience, there's no such thing as ground truth. No. There might be for some specific aspects, like if I do a RAG thing, and then I can start talking about retrieval precision and all of these metrics. That makes sense, and I can apply some metrics, Blue and Rouge, and all these newer things. But yeah, it's exactly that. And you have the kind of challenge of ground truth is a bit of a slippery concept. How much do I need human evaluation? Do I have human in the loop, human on the loop? How scalable is that really?
Yeah. How expensive?
And then there's obviously LLM as a judge, using LLMs to evaluate other LLMs, which the first time people hear that, they're like, Inception. But it actually makes a lot of sense because it's a sort of independent layer of verification, and you can have models that are trained specifically to look for certain things. So like Llama Guard was one that was trained specifically to, detect toxicity or things going outside of specific guardrails. And guardrails in general are often using LLMs now. So yeah, I think you're totally right. The whole evaluation and monitoring piece is definitely a new challenge, and we need to apply some of the new metrics that we have for specific use cases. We should also be thinking really hard with that product mindset. What are the metrics we actually care about?
Hey.
So a great example I always think about is when I learned about containment rates for chatbots, right? So there's a metric you can calculate that basically says how long until you demand to speak to a human, and that's your containment rate, right? No, but that's a good metric of performance.
Yes,
because
but I also wonder, can you put right next to that the language of the demand,
no,
like
you
how
could. Sentiment? No, you could. You can live track sentiment, right? No, but people do this, right? They say, how long do I contain them working with the bot? Do I successfully complete the task? And what's the sentiment of the conversation?
Yeah,
either in summary or through time, if you're able to do that. But those are kind of examples of proxy metrics, but they're far more aligned to your business outcome or your desired product outcome, right? They're not vanity metrics, which I've been fighting against my entire career. You almost don't care about, you do care in some aspect, but it's like time to first token. Oh, I got that from 0.1 second to 0.09 seconds, right? Not that big a deal. However, everyone is dumping out of my chatbot after three lines because the chatbot just doesn't have a clue what's going on. That's the metric you care about, right? I don't care that the first token came really fast, but the rest of the tokens were absolute garbage. So you just need to be clear, what's a vanity metric and what's a real metric that you're looking after. And that's the cycle we're in now. But yeah, you absolutely can't take existing monitoring tools and just plug them in. For LLMs, you have to think. You can still build pipelines and, do the calculations and calculate these metrics, but it is different. So I do very much take that point. It's not plug and play.
Wait, what are some other vanity metrics? Because that is such a good one. The time to first token is something that you should be looking at further down the field. Makes 100% sense. I'm sure you have seen a lot of other ones.
Yeah, so I got this from the book Lean Startup by Eric Rice, which is a classic, absolutely brilliant book. But it's classic things like hits on a web page. You don't really care about hits on a web page. If you're selling something, it's more how much product did they sell.
Yeah,
things like that. So when it comes to ML models, I don't care how many predictions you ran. Really, I care about why were you running the prediction in the first place, or to sell more mortgages or something. Well, how many more mortgages did you sell? It's just asking that next question. I think about things like the Toyota 5 Whys. Toyota had it's 5 Whys to diagnose issues, but sometimes I just like asking why lots of times anyway, because then you get to the real heart of the problem. So yeah, things like that. Things like now latency and all these things are important, right? Because if things take minutes to load, that's a terrible experience.
Yeah.
But it's just making sure that's not the only thing you're driven by. Because once they're above a certain level, it is a vanity project, making them slightly better. It's more what's the core offering you're trying to deliver.
It's there's certain things that need to be within a bound, but when you hit that, you really need to be looking at the most important metrics. And if those other things go outside of their bound, then you should look at them. But for the most part, how many mortgages are you selling is a very, very clear way of being able to say this is valuable or this is not.
Exactly, and it speaks across the technology business divide, which still sort of exists. One that's a bit more subtle but relates to this is I'm a big fan of DORA metrics, so the DevOps kind of industry standard metrics. So these are I won't remember them all, but change failure rate. How often does a change to production fail? Time from a change to production, deployment frequency, all these things, right? So they're basically a set of 4 metrics that are the standards in industry for DevOps maturity. And it's really interesting because I brought in previous organizations those for MLOps and said they're an important part of MLOps. But you can play the vanity metric game there, because in some organizations you might say, our change failure rate is 0. What's your deployment frequency though? Or once a year? right? So you can play games like that, and you say, "But how much value did you drive from the solutions?" Oh, about X million or whatever. And you say, "Well, if we actually accepted some change failure rate and upped our deployment frequency, we could generate 5 or 10x more value." And that's when you sort of, that's the vanity metric game you can play. And I've seen that a lot, especially in more conservative industries. You can get fixated on the wrong thing. Like we must avoid this failure type at all costs. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes the downsides are actually relatively small. You should move fast and just try things.
Yeah, and it goes back to really deeply understanding what you're trying to do, what your end goal is. And I really like how you pointed out there's that tech, non-tech divide, like the business side of the house and the technology side of the house. And if you can service the business side of the house, you're going to be in a great position, because people are going to, if you can speak in dollars and cents, people are going to like what you're doing.
Yeah, but I think it's incumbent on us to speak that language, because why are we there as technologists? I'm not, you're not a technologist in a large financial organization or a large organization of almost any type. You're not there because someone wants to pay you to have fun playing with tools, right? It's great if you can have that, right? I'm very lucky to have a career where that is true. I am fundamentally there to help drive value for customers, stakeholders, shareholders, etc. That it's just the truth. But that works even if you're in the third sector, even if you're in charities, right? You're there to, help your service users and help the people you help. You're not being paid to sit there because, people are really keen that Andy has a good time. That's not sort of, why I come into work every day. And I think that's super, super important to remember, right?
Yeah. Keep that front of mind, put it on a Post-it and put it on your wall so that
I am here to serve.
Yeah. Well, we had this guy, Nick, on a few episodes ago, and he was saying how he was listening to a leadership conversation or podcast, I think it was, and how they were really excited because they recognized an area that they could automate in their business. And they said, yeah, and then we can get rid of all those expensive humans. And so he made the point of somebody's always trying to figure out a way to not pay you. So you have to be figuring out a way to make sure you're getting and creating more value than the other opposite force that is trying to make you not get paid.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be a cost center as an individual. You want to be a value generator, right? I always think about that though, because some of the best teams I've worked in were very aligned to ROI for the team, and having an ROI target. And I try and think about that for myself. What's my ROI when I come in every day? Just am I delivering far more value than I'm taking out? And you like to think you are, and I think in most cases people are. That's why jobs exist.
Yeah.
But the point is you can't just sort of assume it's for granted to that point. You can't just you're not there just to spin up cool demos. You're there to drive value for the organization and teams you're part of. And that's just super important to bear in mind. But it's still a fun challenge. Like, this is the thing. It's not, people think that might take the fun out of it. It absolutely doesn't. I've always been driven by that. I don't want to just tinker for no reason. I want to be like there and go, that thing that you use every day, dear customer, we help build that. I think that's really sort of exciting.
These teams that you speak of that were some of the best you've worked with, which were highly aligned on ROI, what do you think made them like that? What were some of the things that if I'm on a team, I could take back to my team and say, hey, we might want to think about this?
Yep. Great leadership. I think that's
what does great leadership mean?
Exactly. I'm going to tell you. Don't worry. So I just think great leadership is someone who provides clarity, someone who provides stability, someone who provides an environment in which you feel psychologically safe. I'm a big fan of that, but also where you're safe to innovate and try things within the appropriate bounds for the organization you're in. But as someone who provides air cover and backs you, it says, and wants to listen to your ideas, no matter what level you're at. I've been in organizations where like it's super horizontal, really large organization, super horizontal, and that is excellent because that new data scientist you've just hired might have the best idea that anyone's ever had. So make sure you have an environment where they can say that. Also, you as I heard this phrase before, Hippo's highest paid person's opinion. Hippos are bad, right? You shouldn't just look at the highest paid person and assume they know everything, or the most senior person. I work on the basis that I know nothing. I'll go in and I might be the most senior engineer in the room, but I just kind of always assume all these people are smarter than me. Maybe that's my inherent imposter syndrome. But it's a really good tool because it means you listen.
Yeah.
And people come up with amazing ideas and they solve problems. So that's what good leadership is. I think alignment with, like we said, the organization, the business, which comes through leadership, but is also just should be part of your team culture. Like, why are you there every day? You're there to, and it could just be enable my colleagues, have a mission, right? I'm there to
sell more mortgages.
Yeah, sell more mortgages. I like to think we're driving more value for our customers, right?
Okay.
Or I'm trying to stop fin crime, or I'm trying to, whatever it is, whatever the mission is, be very clear on the mission and just really feel that through the team. And then I think get stuff done. I think Barack Obama or someone said that in their autobiography, right? And I just always think about that. Be the person who gets stuff done. Be the team who gets stuff done. That's just so critically important. It just ties in with everything we're saying. If you're the ones who sort of hum and ha and you think and, you come back and forward and, that's not where you want to be. You want to be the people who you say, yes, grab it by the horns, let's go. I think that's it. That's what made those teams successful.
And speaking again on this, having the mission, is that something that you feel like you've seen people continuously talk about when you're on these teams? Is it, or is it just because it's easy to forget, right? And
that is
in positions where I've led teams, I know that I've said it a few times, but it's incredible how you think you're saying it a lot, and then when you circle back, you recognize people have no idea. They're like, no, I never heard you say that. What? Or you said that? Or that's our mission? Wait, what?
Why are you saying our mission's about mortgages? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, no, absolutely. So when I kind of have teams and stuff and led teams, I always try and bring it back to why are we doing this? Because I think it's important for people to hear and feel, it helps people understand why their contribution is valuable. If you're saying to someone, go fill in these, 3 forms or going on board to this tool or help this team, it's important to say, and remember the reason we're doing that, because if we can get these teams onto this platform, they will stop fin crime. They will stop more financial crime. Right? Or, it's kind of, I think it's important to embed that in, and I don't think it's false or kind of disingenuous or corny to do that. I think, it's just the way it is. So I think the mission, coming back to that mission, is always super important. And recognizing a job well done. I said be the person who gets stuff done. It's important to call out, this was a good example. We should try and replicate that. Or this didn't go so well. How can we learn from it? I think that's important as well. But I think mission's super important. So I kind of wake up and come into work every day and try and think, how can I enable all of them? I actually tell people my job is to make you look better.
Nice.
My job is to make you do better stuff. I want to enable you to go faster. I want to enable you to deploy more models. I want to enable you to build better products and services, right? That's my job, and I love it, and that's why I'm there. And that mission sort of really helps me focus on what's important.
So last one for you before we jump in, because dude, so good on that enablement part.
Yep.
Do you look at any metrics around, and maybe we'll cut this out because you're like, yeah, that's part of those DevOps metrics that I was talking about earlier. But I think about the enabling, so there's the enablement piece. So are you looking at metrics that are like time to production type metrics?
Yeah, through my career, I've always been obsessed with that. So time to value, I call it, or I've heard it called in different contexts. But exactly that. I think that's one of the key ones, right? So you go from an idea on a whiteboard or a sheet of paper or whatever to a service, and there's always a debate about when is the starting gun fired, and when do we say the clock started. But fine. Just pick a definition. It's the first commit in the repo. It's the first meeting we have, whatever. But just pick a definition, and exactly that. So how quickly can I get to production? And then all those DORA metrics I did mention before. Also things, again, back to that value piece, right? What is the value of this portfolio of stuff? If we get to the end of, like, say 2 years from now or whatever, and we say we've not really delivered much ROI, then we've lost sight of that mission. And ROI can be, I think it's important, ROI can be defined in some more qualitative ways, right? Some things are just core enablers you need in an organization. So, like, we need good HR technology. We need lots of stuff. We need just core IT infrastructure, etc.
Yeah.
They are not necessarily things that drive up sales or cut costs here, etc. But they deliver good ROI. It's a bit more of a qualitative calculation. But yeah, look at metrics like that. I want to look more at, and I've done this before, look at metrics around, adoption, key tools and enablers. So if you build out, say for example, some templates or exemplars for how to do specific things. So templates on how to do monitoring or certain training types of process. Be really keen to track, how many people are actually consuming and using them, and that justifies the value. And then what you can say is you can kind of bootstrap and say, do you know what? 10 teams have used this and another 10 are asking for it. That tells me there's something here. And it tells you if you should invest more time in that versus, doing this other side project that actually only one person will ever use. And, it's a bit kind of blue sky and stuff. So I'm very metrics driven, and I try to be as much as possible.
And that brings up a great point, which I completely forgot about earlier, that I wanted to ask you about. Nice. Now it's coming back to me on being able to distinguish or know which use cases are more valuable than others, and recognizing this model or use case, whatever service, is driving millions for the business. So we really need to babysit it, versus this is new. We don't have clear stuff around it. It's cool, but we don't necessarily have to do the same amount to it. And I think that goes hand in hand with what you're just saying, is how if you have those metrics about who's using it, what's it doing, how is it working, you can properly organize yourself to make sure that the right things are getting the right attention.
Yes, absolutely. And that whole thing about speaking the language of the business, like, some of the most valuable people in that conversation are like business embedded professionals who are maybe even not technical, or it could be the data scientists working most closely with the business, whatever. But the people who are closest to the actual value proposition always write the best business cases, and you just sort of, as a technologist, help them and say what's possible and what's not. So if someone says, I want to catch 100% of fraudulent transactions, you can come in and go, that's probably not possible, but how valuable would it be if we caught 50% or 60% or 80%? And you can start building a case around it, and you very quickly, to your point, discern, actually, this is a very good return, or this is a critical enabler. And sometimes, though, you have to be a bit kind of, you have to kind of take the riskier bets and just say, this is a huge upside and low downside if it fails, but it potentially is a huge upside if we can get this right. So we should try that. And you just do that. You manage it like a portfolio, an investment portfolio, if you like.
Sometimes that's a great analogy.
Yeah, but I think that's the way to do it. You've got your sure bets. You've got your kind of medium risk ones that are a bit more valuable, and then you've got your ones that are kind of blue sky, put it all in black type thing. But the upside is huge, and I think it's just really good leadership. Coming back to that point, helps you because they help manage that whole risk investment decision. And the more you're in the sort of the industry, the more you can smell a good use case. I think you sort of develop a bit of a sense for it. You can go, this is going to run into lots of problems. I've done something like this before, and we thought it was good on paper, and it was a nightmare for these 10 reasons. And then there's other cases you go, I know that sounds difficult, but actually in practice, it's 3 steps and you're done. Let's just do it. Like, the upside might not even be that great, but it's so easy to do. Let's do it. So there's that's where it's good to have good people around who've been through the ringer a bit.
So good, man. Well, Andy, it's been a pleasure talking to you, dude. This is so much fun, and I appreciate you coming back on here. And for anyone out there that has not read your book, if you want to be like the smart folks at Oxford, go and read it.
Just like that. Thanks for having me, Demetrios. It's great.